all of that. Missed the great preamble about your love for the Windows Phone. And that's all anyone will hear now because that's what I've.
That's true. I love Windows in general, I will say.
So I tried to put together a bit of a narrative for the talk today. You had some good topics, and I am just coming off of my conference high from last week. Got to attend Content Marketing World. No lie, probably the best marketing conference I've ever been to.
Wow.
And I know
you're feeling all smart now, like you're gonna.
I have the illusion of smartness. I
go
have
on and
the
on about this.
No, yeah, not at all. But I did get really excited, just at the size of it, because you've been to shows before. You've been to South by, which is a big mashup of stuff, right? But what was exciting to me for Content Marketing World was it specifically focuses on this thing that's content marketing, and as you and I have talked about, that can still mean a lot, right? Like native advertising, influencer marketing, content marketing, owned, earned, whatever. But the crazy thing is, I think for me, I get so used to doing my day-to-day, and it seems like a small thing. There were 3,500 people at this conference in Cleveland.
That's a lot of people. That's a lot of people.
3,500 people went to Cleveland, which, by the way, is a delightful city. I intend to go back, and just for the hell of it, because there's some cool stuff to do. But yeah, it's like content marketing as a discipline is a thing. I've said that for years. I mean, I've worked here for 6 years at Collective Bias, but it's bigger than I think I had really conceptualized.
That's fantastic because it still feels like, I think when we talk to brands that we talk to, it still feels like we're kind of beating that drum as a voice crying out in the wilderness kind of situation, right? Where like people still don't get it. I think a lot of companies still don't get it, but it's fantastic that more and more people are coming around.
Now, we'll say a lot of the shows seem to focus on most of the vendors at the expo were tech companies that help to do some sort of digital asset management or single sourcing so content can be reused. It was really focused on corporate content teams producing content, keeping track of content they somehow source from other places. But there were a lot of other things going on too that were just really cool. And I don't want to kind of kill the end of the show here, so because I've got some of that planned for later too. So the theme for the show today, I called it Content Shocked, and that was inspired by one of the articles you found. And the idea is, and we've heard this, I think, a little bit too. I do believe it's a very robust industry. It's going to continue to grow. I will just throw that out there right now. I don't think content marketing is going to slow down anytime soon, if ever. But the contrarian view often is that, holy crap, there's so much content already. People can't keep up with it. They're drowning in it. How could we possibly handle more? And to start, to really just put some numbers behind that, just to make your brain explode, found an article this is a year ago, so if anything, these numbers are only bigger. How much content is produced every minute? This was called the Data Explosion 2014 Minute by Minute infographic from ACI.info. Every minute, Facebook users share nearly 2.5 million pieces of content. Twitter, there are 300,000 tweets, 220,000 new photos on Instagram, 72 hours of new video content uploaded to YouTube, not viewed, just uploaded. 50,000 new apps downloaded by Apple users, 200 million emails sent in a minute, and Amazon generates over 80,000 in online sales. Oh, that's a lot.
What?
Yeah. That's daunting. When I look at it.
I think it begs the question though, because we're talking about whether or not, like, we have too much content out there, It's how much of that is actually worth reading or consuming, depending on the medium.
Well, it depends on who you are. Depends on what you like. I mean, whether depending on how much of it is quality, the quality versus quantity argument. Some of it is valuable to somebody. I would say all of it is valuable to somebody, right?
Yes.
So we can call it a sea. We can call it a veritable universe of content that's out there. And there were 2 news articles that kind of came up today. Let's hit those, and then let's talk about the bigger sort of meta thing about this path. But in terms of just late developments, so Google and Twitter, in the ever ongoing saga of things that make me think Google should buy Twitter, are teaming up to offer instant articles.
It's beginning to feel a little bit like a long string of Friends seasons, like with Ross and Rachel, like will they, won't they? Right?
They did just come off of a break.
They did. So we're anxiously awaiting to see what happens in the Google Twitter romantic situation here.
So this development, though, it's a response to Facebook announced, I don't know, a month ago, 6 weeks ago, they were going to have instant articles, where it was basically you click on a link as a pop-up, you kind of got a long-form piece of content without having to go anywhere else. Now, if memory serves, that's actually hosted on Facebook, but this particular offering from Google and Twitter is different.
Yeah, so, we kind of went back and forth about whether that was a good or a bad thing for publishers. We actually just looked at our stats for one of our web properties this week, and 96% of our traffic comes from Facebook. So I think we're probably in the realm of people who Facebook instant articles would be attractive to. You just basically have to turn over your monetization strategy to someone else if you want to use that. Now, with this, it's basically cached pages of these articles that are being stored, I believe, on Google servers to be served up instantly. So they're not actually coming to your website, but it is a cached version of the page, and your ads should still display on this, which makes it, I think, much more attractive for publishers, because you still control the user experience because it's your page, and you still get to control your monetization strategy because it's your page.
And I think that's, one of those things when all these platforms are out there, you don't want to put all of your eggs in any one basket that you don't own anymore. As big as Facebook is getting, I can always go, yes, but remember MySpace. And it seems unlikely, but there's a chance that sometime in the future, Zuckerberg's enterprise could go belly up. And if that's the only place you're engaging with people, you're in trouble.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, I think especially when we're talking about brands, businesses and companies who are involved in content and content creation, owning that user experience is a really big deal. It's really frightening, even just for bloggers and kind of micro publishers to turn over that level of control to another entity, who then can control everything. You have to play Facebook's game if you're going to be on Facebook instant articles. You have to play by the rules, or you're out of luck. This still lets you play by your own set of rules. You get to make money however you want to. You still get to control the user experience and the interface of your site. They're coming to your web page. It's basically, in the words of Google, a snapshot of a web page, which is, I think, great. It's also a big win for Google because the likelihood that those pages are serving Google ads is probably pretty high. So they're going to make money be on that web traffic regardless.
Right. So in terms of that owned versus, well, I guess, how do you own your strategy, right? The next little quick hit article that we have is the opposite view, because it is Facebook. Facebook's wanting to own not only content now, but they're looking to own commerce. We saw it with buy buttons. Now they're looking to upgrade pages so you can actually have a little storefront.
So, I think when I read this, I thought, who is this for? Like whenever Facebook launches something, they kind of roll out their, some big names like Neiman Marcus or Nordstrom or someone like that that's going to be involved in something like this. But I think the reality is major companies have way too much inventory to deal with this. But small companies, little boutiques, small and medium-sized businesses that have a limited inventory, I think could really make a good run of having not just a buy button, but a proper storefront that you go to their page. There's a page. You go to their Facebook page. There's a tab where you can go and see the stuff they have for sale and buy it right there.
Well, and it does make sense for super small businesses. Yeah, that if you don't have a lot of infrastructure, it's a way to kind of just get on there. And the article was even talking about, who did they quote? Yeah, I can't remember, but a lot of small businesses do it, right? They don't even bother having a website anymore. They're just like, check us out on Facebook. And if that's your strategy, if that's where you're going anyway, it does make sense to kind of monetize it. It does. On the flip side, it ties you a little more tightly to Facebook. So, if your small business takes off and then again Facebook goes away, you're going to scramble just a little bit.
Yeah, I think on the flip side of that, if there was a company that was worth getting in bed with that closely, I think Facebook is probably the safest one.
So has Facebook become, I don't want to say too big to fail, but as Facebook, does it now have the credibility that IBM had like in the 80s?
I think
social.
I think that they're probably a little beyond that. Because they're not just a well-established brand. They've won the identity war online. Like I think we have to call that what it is. The Facebook profile, a person's Facebook profile, is their online identity. There's no other company that comes close to having that kind of penetration. Not even close.
Yeah.
So I think they've won that, and to unseat them from that isn't something that a company could do easily or quickly, or without substantial investment. So I don't see that going away anytime soon. And when you look at, so this to me is almost a play for Etsy, right? Like I think small time crafters, makers, that sort of thing, could definitely make good money on this, especially if you've already been sharing content, you've got a good following on Facebook. I think you could go a long way with this and really make a run of it.
It'll be interesting to see how it develops for sure. So those are just two little interesting content /social/digital, because it's all the same thing now, developments this week. Let's put that into context now for this bigger content shock. You had initially found, when we were putting together the show list, and I just closed my browser, you had found an article on Moz.com that really established this idea. It's the first time I'd kind of heard it, in this particular way. The article was How to Thrive During Content Shock. What were your big takeaways from that in terms of setup and then a strategy for thriving?
Yeah, so basically I think they are discussing the points that you made at the beginning of the show, which is there's a ton of content out there. There's more content being put out probably every minute than we could ever consume. There's too much content out there, and for a brand who wants to get into content marketing, right? That we've looked at all the options, we've believed all the people and the experts, and decided content marketing is the way to go. it can feel very daunting. Like, how do I get an audience? How do I get people to pay attention to me? How do I stand out against my competitors? I think it's actually very doable, and I have a couple thoughts here. So they listed 6 main points. One is you can leverage a mega brand if you can get a relationship with some mega brand, like a celebrity endorsement is basically what they're referring to. That's a great way to stand out.
That's a great way to stand out, but to me that seems kind of like the 1 in a million shot. Like, yeah, if I can get Scarlett Johansson to talk about my product, people will hear about it. Even really established brands don't always have access to someone or the budget, right? Like, it could be a brand new product with an established brand, and they're like, okay, we're going to experiment with this, so this is the amount that we're going to put toward it right now. So while that would be good, I'm not sure if that's a thing that everybody can do.
Yeah, and they shared a couple of stats that I was actually looking for earlier when we were talking through some of the stats. So there is a ton of content, but if you look at the engagement that happens with it, 75% of content shows no external links, so no one's linking to it, which is a problem, right? And over 50% had 2 or fewer Facebook interactions. So 50% of the content, over 50% of content on Facebook is getting 2 to 0 interactions in the form of a share, like, or a comment.
Which really kind of goes toward that thing you said at the very beginning of, that we may be awash in content, but there's not much of it that's very good.
Exactly. So, I think the big takeaway from this is that if you can make good content, you are probably going to stand out. Right. So their other points are invest more money. I think that's in a vertically oriented way. They use Red Bull as an example, who really invests a ton of money in media creation, which I think isn't realistic for many brands. But if you have the money, invest the money and really make amazing content that nobody else can match. As it goes down, it gets into things that are a little more realistic. So we can be unique. So offer content that people can't find elsewhere, that is interesting or useful or entertaining for your audience and for your potential consumers that they can't get anywhere else. Be an early mover, promote better, and work harder. Round out the bottom 6 recommendations. And I think they actually make the point about being an early mover. I totally agree with them. I think that they may have understated it a little bit, which is almost anyone can be an early mover at this stage of the game. The number of brands who are doing content really well, and making really good content that people enjoy using and consuming is pretty small. And the chances that one of them are already in your industry are even smaller.
And even if someone is doing it well, it doesn't mean there's still room. You can have multiple brands in the same space producing good content. I was reminded as we were talking through this on the podcast when I got to interview Chris Brogan, a couple months ago, and his comment was, his thing right now is solving 1,000-person problems. It doesn't matter brand big or small. When you're producing content, if you can solve a problem for 1,000 people, that can be 1,000 new customers or 1,000 sales. Even the largest, you start getting customers in 1,000 people chunks, that's going to make a difference to your bottom line.
Definitely.
Okay, so I wanted to add to this. I ran across this morning. Let me put this in the feed. Yeah, of course I name dropped. But it would, if it didn't make sense. But if I just said some schmo said this, it would have sounded good. But everybody goes, "Oh, Chris Brogan said it. It must be something good." So Brian Solis, who I have not spoken to personally, but is a pretty smart guy, came out with this article a couple of weeks ago called "The 10 Commandments of Content Marketing." Similar things, right? So these are things I think we all need to think about in terms of doing quality content versus quantity. There's actually one other thing I don't have the link handy right now. Probably the best breakout session I listened to last week was from a guy named Jay Acunzo, and it was stop arguing about quality versus quantity. He had tips for being prolific, for putting out, but he also warned against hitting what he called the crapping point, where your content just goes off.
I love that term.
Yeah. So it's possible to put out a bunch of junk, but if you really care about your audience and you really care about the content you're doing, then it should be good, and you can still get a lot of it out. So this Brian Solis article, yep, okay, I put it in the feed. It talks about some very simple things, right? Don't assume you only have one audience. An audience on Instagram is totally different from an audience on Twitter, as you and I have talked about when we've done sort of these platform-specific dives into things. Stop reaching out to people only when you need them. Please, yes. Can I get a holla on that one? Because you need to build relationships and provide value to people. Stop selling. I mean, these are sort of social media / content marketing nuts and bolts, but I think a lot of people forget about them a lot.
Yeah. So he said a few things in this article that I really loved. That was definitely one of those like amen moments. His first point is don't chase shiny objects. And I feel like I'm having this conversation at least weekly with people who want to get in on the latest, coolest thing, right? It's been Snapchat for the last year. Now we're trying to figure out how to do Meerkat or Periscope or Blab or whatever.
And by the way, I fully understand how funny it is for you to say that while we're having this conversation on Blab.
True. You know what? To name drop, Chris Brogan was on a was on another Blab with Joel Comm. If you're watching, he has awesome shows here on Blab. He was interviewing him, and Chris said, "You know what? I ditched the term social media, digital, whatever, years ago because, right, that no one says I specialize in telephone, right? You don't. Right. It's a channel to talk to people, and I love thinking about it like that. That these are tools to use. We're solving people problems and not looking at these shiny objects of like, oh, well, what's the next thing? Everybody's on Snapchat. We need to go get on Snapchat too. Where are your people? Where are your customers? And what are they doing? Do they even want to see whatever you're going to put on Snapchat? Right. Those are the questions to ask first. And what stories are we telling these people? What narratives are we producing for these people? And are these content channels the right channels to tell those stories on? Those are the questions that we ask first, and then decide what the appropriate distribution method is.
Right, and I think a couple of other good things. Tracy just called out she didn't agree with number 4 on here, which is using technology to scale your stuff. Shall we say? And Solis points out that technology forces us into a trap of scale. Like I said, at the conference last week, there were a ton of technology vendors. I really think like automation can be okay. One of the ones I've found, the best ones I found, a tip. This wasn't even a vendor who was there. It's a simple service called Deliverit. It's dlvr.it. You can subscribe to feeds and have them post out to your social channels on whatever basis you define as part of the formula. I'm using it to consume our company blog and put it out on my LinkedIn, something I would do anyway, but now I just don't have to, right? So it's a way that I'm able to still generate awareness for the company I work for, provide hopefully useful information to the people that I'm connected with, just like I would. It's just one less thing I have to remember to do that day.
Yeah. So you know what? I'm gonna kind of straddle the fence on this one and say, like, I get what he's saying, because when you get into this technology slippery slope, right, and you start thinking about scale, it becomes very, very easy to get into the trap of using technology to to dehumanize things because it scales so much more effectively. I think that there are ways that we can use technology that enhances the one-to-one relationship that a brand should have with their customers, and even makes it feel more special, right? I think that those are the places that we should use technology and not to do away with that.
No, I agree. And it's, again, there's just so much out there. You have to find the technology that's best for your audience. There was one other one. Oh, the last point I want to call out, and the article itself is great. Read the whole thing, but refrain from exclusively following case studies of people doing great content. And again, this seems kind of funny since we're a couple of marketing wonks talking about how you should, do content and content marketing. But that was one of the points in that quality versus quantity breakout session last week. One of his tips was get out of the marketing echo chamber. If all we do is listen to, and no knock against them, I'm quoting a Brian Solis article. We've brought up Chris Brogan, a couple of smart guys, but if all you're doing is listening to them or listening to, and not getting inspired by anything, right? Get away from marketing, right? Marketing, like you're saying, marketing is kind of like telephone. What inspires you outside of your job? Is it art? Is it literature? Is it music? Is it food? I don't care, because those are the things your customers are going to respond to, right? How do you put your product in that context in life?
Yeah, so there's a couple other of great points on here too that are worth calling out. I was really intrigued, and I'm interested in your opinion on this, on his advice to ditch the marketing calendar. I mean, this is the quantity versus quality discussion. He says that content calendars make you think about quantity and not quality, and your customers are already overwhelmed with mediocrity, so don't give them more. We live and die by those calendars in the industry.
Yeah, I think if you have a giant team and it's hey, it's Sunday was National Grandparents' Day. So if you go, Sunday's National Grandparents' Day, we need to figure out a way to create a tweet that somehow talks about National Grandparents' Day. That's horrible. Please don't do that. Stop right away, unless you're a greeting card company. Right. If it's Tuesday and it's always, here's the deal. A calendar is great. If you can't come up with a good piece of content that fits that thing on the calendar, don't put it out, I think, is the biggest thing, right? It's okay to say, okay, we'll just wait. Calendars are good for having some discipline and some regularity to your content. Where I'm trying to hone my game is understanding some of these algorithms that are out there. I had a great, Casey, I told you the podcast thing I went to, the guy was saying the iTunes algorithm has a 48-hour look back. So it really likes, like, if you publish on a Monday and a Monday and a Thursday, it starts to see that regularity and can optimize for that. Might start suggesting you to a few more people. That's a good thing, right? So there are ways to go, okay, well, we need to come up, but you can't put out crap. You got to have something good to put out on a Monday and a Thursday. Otherwise, just please stop.
Yeah, you know what? I think that we get into that trap of believing that because we put out something every day, we have to put out something every day. Yeah. The reality is that, I mean, unless you're like, Deuce.com or the Pioneer Woman or something, like your followers don't notice, right? They don't notice that something from you didn't come through the feed today. What they will notice though, when it's good stuff that comes through their feed every day, or whenever you decide to publish it. I think a couple other things on here that were fantastic. Stop creating content for the people who will approve it. You may not deal with this as much as often as I deal with this. However, it's a really big problem. I think it's one of the main reasons why it's so difficult to find good quality content from brands.
Yeah, but it's part of that marketing echo chamber, right? Like it's the head of the department, which is, they got there for some reason. They should know what they're doing, but you have to really look at what your audience responds to more than anything else. when go with what people engage with and do more of that.
Yeah, and so the final point there, I think that's worth mentioning is the his comment on mediumism. I think that's the right way to pronounce that.
Yes.
The placing inordinate value on channels over people, and I think that goes with point number one. And we had this conversation, I think last week, right? About the distribution method is not content. That the distribution method is actually inconsequential to the subject of content. Is the content good? Does it tell a good story? Now let's find the correct ways to distribute this content to the right people. But those are just the bridges to bring the traffic in. They are not the attraction in themselves.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more. You know what? I want to open this up for a second. Let's see if Tracy hung in there with us for the whole discussion. Do you have any thoughts? Or is that David that joined as well? You don't have to. Just always love. That's one of the best things I love about Blab is the ability to get some thoughts from people other than Casey, because he and I talk a lot anyway.
The seat is open. Also, questions.
Questions.
We'll answer questions too.
I got a whiteboard next to me. I can draw stick figures, whatever. That's all right, David. So one other thing I'm going to throw out there, and this is just, I'm probably going to publicize this for a while because I like it. So this conference I went to last week was Content Marketing World. They just released a documentary, I guess. They put it together with a couple of other folks called The Story of Content. Casey, I just sent you the link this morning. Did you have a chance to watch it yet?
I have not watched it. I've watched the first few minutes and then kind of skipped through it to see what was it. You know what? I always look to see if they bring up Willy Wonka. That's
well, they didn't bring up Willy Wonka, but it was interesting. It's one of the reasons that they based that event in Cleveland. The guy that started it, I mean, he worked for a marketing company, in the area, but they actually traced the lineage of content marketing back to like Sherwin-Williams in 1860, something like that. They came out with a newsletter first and then a magazine, and the magazine wasn't Buy More Paint. It was about decorating your house and things to do. Oh, and by the way, brought to you by Sherwin-Williams, which is we think what we do is so new and innovative right now, but like you said, the technology is kind of new. The thing is, and much like John Deere, David, they in that video, they actually do a really long piece on John Deere. I think their magazine is called The Furrow, and it's been around for decades. And they have a whole department. I mean, they're a publishing house. There's a bank in Sweden, I think, that basically has a newsroom more sophisticated than most of the independent journalism groups, and they do financial news. Just even if some of the stories may not be beneficial to the bank. So, Casey, I would like to ask you, because I know you've had some opinions on this. How do we define content marketing? Is it content produced by teams in a building? Is it what you and I do, which is really more influencer based?
I think it's actually I would define it in much broader terms, I think, than any of those things. And I think it's really anything that that a brand might produce content-wise that could speak to their customers and promote the brand. I think in general, it's stuff that we produce for the customers and not for the brand, right? Like, I think it's specifically not advertising, but pretty much anything else.
Anything that adds value, essentially.
Right. So yeah, when anything where we produce content that, and I think it isn't necessarily from the brand itself, but it could be from influencers or.
Right. That brings the influencer part in. So cool. Well, I will say, take some time, watch. I just get excited when I see that video. I don't know. I like the idea that this thing is not. It was 6 years ago. It was kind of cool to think it was something brand new, and now I just like knowing that it kind of has a bit of a lineage more than Twitter or whatever.
Yeah, it makes it even more difficult to understand why. So, where did brands kind of forget about this? Right? I mean, it has definitely been around a long time.
So I would say it was in the 50s and 60s. It is the Mad Men era.
The Mad Men era, of course. That definitely makes sense.
I mean, because soap operas came along, that was content marketing. That was in the 50s, but it was the Mad Men era when you had mass media where you could put out the message was that thing that connected everybody, right? You were all watching I Love Lucy or whatever, pick your show over the 30 or 40 years since then, where your family was sitting down and you shared that, and then you went to work the next day. It's like, hey, did you see that really cool commercial that was on? That was awesome. And people and marketers, advertisers, drank their own Kool-Aid, if you will, of we can control a message and we can push this thing out and we can get people to think what we want. That was always a fantasy and a fallacy. But now the way the technology has evolved, the only effective marketing long-term is going to be content, because people don't need your broadcast message anymore.
So, and I agree. And I think that, I think to kind of add on to that, the only effective thing long term is like real, authentic content that builds relationships. Like, I think that it's more important than ever to use those pieces of content to build trust with people,
right?
Because that's when, like, if something goes wrong, they give you the benefit of the doubt, rather than, grabbing a pitchfork and coming after you.
Yes, no one likes pitchforks or fire. So this is great. I really appreciate everybody who hopped on and hung with us. If you liked the conversation, thought we had something to add value for you, you can go check out some of our previous stuff. We've only gotten on Blab recently, but we've been doing a podcast for the last few months. You can go to iTunes or Stitcher.com and search for Story Selling, StorySelling. And then I'll take the thanks, David. Appreciate that. I'm also taking the audio from this and chunking it up into podcast episodes. So this will turn into 2, maybe 3 shows, and you'll be able to digest those at your leisure, or forward them around to friends, which would be awesome if you get people to the Blab or to the podcast in the future. We would really appreciate it. Cool. Hey, David, I'm going to follow you. I am following you. So, when you start your Blab, send a shout out. I'd love to hop on and help you that where we could. So, that said, y'all have a good week. And we do this every Monday, sometimes in the morning, sometimes in the afternoon, but we're trying to do this pretty regularly. So hopefully we'll see you again soon.
Thank y'all.
Thanks.